In the quiet town of Millfield, Ohio, where maple trees line the streets and everybody knows your name, the morning of October 17, 1998, began like any other autumn Saturday. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke from nearby chimneys. But for 32-year-old high school English teacher Rebecca Winters, this ordinary day would be her last. Rebecca was beloved at Millfield High School. Her classroom walls were adorned with literary quotes and student projects, a testament to her passion for teaching. Her colleagues described her as dedicated and warm, the kind of teacher who stayed late to help struggling students and organized community book drives. Her students spoke of how she made Shakespeare relevant and how she remembered each of their birthdays with a small handwritten note. "She made me believe I could be a writer," former student Melissa Carver would later tell investigators. "Ms. Winters saw something in me that I didn't see in myself." That Saturday morning, Rebecca had planned to meet her sister Karen for coffee at the local diner. When Rebecca didn't show up and wasn't answering her phone, Karen thought little of it at first. Perhaps she'd overslept or gotten caught up grading papers, both common occurrences. But as morning turned to afternoon, concern crept in. By evening, after multiple unanswered calls and a drive past Rebecca's small blue Craftsman house where her car still sat in the driveway, Karen called the police. Officer James Downing responded to the call. The porch light was on at Rebecca's house, and the morning newspaper remained untouched on the welcome mat. Knocking received no answer. After a call to the police station for authorization, Downing entered the home. Inside, he found signs of a normal Friday evening: a half-empty cup of tea on the coffee table, papers spread across the dining room table waiting to be graded, and a novel face down on the arm of the couch, its bookmark still in place. Rebecca's phone was charging in the kitchen. Her purse and keys were on the counter, but upstairs told a different story. The bedroom door was ajar, with clear signs of a struggle. A lamp lay shattered on the hardwood floor. The bedside table was overturned. A window was open despite the autumn chill, its curtain billowing softly in the breeze. And most disturbing, small droplets of blood on the windowsill that trailed down the side of the house. Rebecca Winters was nowhere to be found. By midnight, Millfield police had secured the scene. By the next morning, yellow tape surrounded the property as state investigators arrived. Rebecca's face was on every local news station, her smile beaming from beneath the headline, "Local Teacher Missing." The community mobilized immediately. Students, parents, teachers, and townspeople formed search parties that combed the woods behind Rebecca's house, the banks of the nearby Hocking River, and every abandoned building within a 5-mile radius. Flyers with Rebecca's photo appeared in shop windows throughout the county. A dedicated hotline buzzed with tips and potential sightings. 3 days into the search, a jogger discovered Rebecca's body in Riverside Park, partially concealed beneath a canopy of fallen leaves just 50 feet from the water's edge. She had been strangled, the medical examiner would later determine, sometime in the early hours of Saturday morning. The killer had transported her body to the park, carefully placing her as if she were sleeping, her hands folded across her chest, her hair arranged neatly around her shoulders. It was deeply personal, Police Chief Walter Morgan told reporters at the time. The care taken with the body suggests someone who knew her well. The investigation that followed was intense, but ultimately fruitless. Rebecca's ex-boyfriend, a pharmaceutical sales representative from Columbus, had a solid alibi. No significant DNA evidence was recovered beyond what appeared to be the victim's own blood and skin cells, likely from defensive wounds. A partial footprint in the soft earth near where the body was found revealed only that the killer likely wore size 11 work boots, a common finding that matched thousands of men in the area. By December, the case had gone cold. The community held a candlelight vigil on what would have been Rebecca's 33rd birthday. Her classroom at Millfield High became an unofficial memorial, with students leaving notes and flowers on her desk for months afterward. Her sister Karen established a scholarship in Rebecca's name for students pursuing education degrees. "Someone in this town knows what happened," Karen said at the one-year anniversary memorial service, her voice breaking. "Someone knows who took my sister from us. Please, if you're out there, it's time to come forward." But no one did. As the seasons changed, as Rebecca's students graduated and moved away, as new teachers occupied her classroom and new stories dominated local headlines, the mystery of who killed Rebecca Winters faded into the background of Millfield's consciousness, a tragedy that had shaken the small town to its core but had never found resolution. For 24 years, the case file gathered dust in the archives of the Millfield Police Department, occasionally reviewed by new detectives but yielding no new leads. The porch light at Rebecca's old house, now occupied by a young family unconnected to the case, continued to illuminate the front steps each night, a coincidental echo of a tragedy long past. No one in Millfield could have predicted that the truth had been living among them all along, or that modern science would finally bring Rebecca's killer to justice more than 2 decades after that chilly October morning when she vanished without a trace. The years that followed Rebecca Winters' murder transformed Millfield in subtle ways. Parents no longer let their children walk home alone. Doors that once remained unlocked were now secured with deadbolts and chain latches. The sense of safety that had defined this small Ohio town eroded, replaced by a lingering unease. The knowledge that a killer had walked among them and might still be there, undetected, unsuspected. Every October, the local newspaper would run a small piece about the unsolved case. Each year, the articles grew shorter, pushed further back in the pages until they became little more than a paragraph in the local history section. Rebecca's sister Karen never gave up, though. Each anniversary of the murder, she would stand on the steps of the town hall with a poster-size photo of Rebecca, handing out flyers that listed the sparse details of the case. "Someone still remembers something they haven't told us," Karen would say to anyone who would listen, her once dark hair now streaked with grey. "It's never too late to come forward." Inside the Millfield Police Department, Rebecca's case file was transferred from detective to detective as officers retired or moved on to other positions. The cardboard box containing evidence, the partial footprint cast, fibers from Rebecca's clothing, the few hairs recovered from her body, was stored in the department's evidence room, occasionally taken out and reviewed when a new lead, however tenuous, came in. Detective Liam Marsh, who joined the force in 2015, developed a particular interest in the case. As a teenager in 1998, he had been one of Rebecca's students, sitting in the back row of her freshman English class. He remembered her enthusiasm when discussing To Kill a Mockingbird, how she'd bring in cookies when the class had perfect attendance for a month, how she'd stayed after school to help him improve his writing when he was in danger of failing. "I became a cop because of what happened to Ms. Winters," he confided to his partner one night during a long stakeout. "I kept thinking that if I had been older, if I had been on the force back then, maybe things would have been different." In 2020, a new police chief, Miranda Reeves, initiated a department-wide review of all cold cases, allocating additional resources to cases with preserved evidence that might benefit from advances in forensic technology. Rebecca's case was at the top of the list. "We've been holding on to evidence for decades that we couldn't properly analyze back then," Chief Reeves explained at a press conference announcing the initiative. "DNA technology has advanced exponentially since the late 90s. What was once insufficient might now be the key to solving these cases." The original investigators had collected scrapings from under Rebecca's fingernails, evidence of a struggle, tiny fragments of skin where she had fought against her attacker. In 1998, the sample had been too degraded, too small to yield usable DNA results with the technology available at the time. But now, with advances in both DNA extraction and analysis techniques, there was hope. The Ohio Bureau of Criminal Investigation's new forensic lab in Columbus took on the case. Using a technique called massively parallel sequencing, lab technicians were able to extract a partial DNA profile from the decades-old evidence. It wasn't complete enough for a definitive match, but it could potentially exclude suspects or indicate familial relationships. Think of it like a puzzle with missing pieces, forensic scientist Dr. Eliza Wong explained to Detective Marsh when he visited the lab. We don't have the whole picture, but we have enough to know what it isn't, and sometimes, with the right database comparison, enough to suggest what it might be. The partial profile was run through CODIS, the Combined DNA Index System, a national database containing DNA profiles from convicted offenders, unsolved crime scenes, and missing persons. There was no direct match, but the system flagged a potential familial connection, someone whose DNA shared enough markers to suggest a biological relationship with the killer. That someone was a 19-year-old college student named Jason Miller, who had submitted a DNA sample after a 2021 arrest for drug possession, charges that were later dropped. Jason had never lived in Millfield. He had no connection to Rebecca Winters, but his DNA suggested that a close male relative, a father, brother, or uncle, might be the person they had been looking for all these years. Detective Marsh and his team began the painstaking work of building a family tree for Jason Miller. They discovered that his father, Brian Miller, had died in a car accident in 2007. Brian had no brothers, but his father, Jason's grandfather, had another son from a previous marriage, Robert Holloway. Robert Holloway. The name initially meant nothing to Detective Marsh, but as he dug deeper into public records, an address from the late 1990s jumped out at him. Holloway had lived just 3 blocks from Rebecca Winters' house in 1998. Further investigation revealed that Holloway had been a janitor at Millfield High School from 1995 to 2000, leaving shortly after Rebecca's murder to take a similar position in a neighboring county. He had never been considered a suspect during the original investigation, just one of dozens of school employees interviewed as a matter of routine, his name buried in the case files among countless others. He was hiding in plain sight, Marsh would later tell reporters. He saw her every day in those hallways. He knew her schedule, knew when she'd be alone. Now, 63 years old, Holloway was still living within an hour's drive of Millfield, working as a maintenance supervisor at an apartment complex in Newark, Ohio. He had no criminal record beyond a DUI in 2005. He was married, had 3 grown children, and by all accounts led a quiet, unremarkable life. But could this seemingly ordinary man be responsible for one of the most haunting, unsolved murders in Millfield's history? To find out, investigators needed a current DNA sample from Holloway to compare with the evidence. Rather than alerting him to their suspicions by requesting a voluntary sample, they opted for surveillance. For 2 weeks, plainclothes officers followed Holloway, waiting for an opportunity to collect discarded DNA, a coffee cup, a cigarette butt, anything that might contain his genetic material. The break came when Holloway attended a high school football game in Newark. After watching him discard a soda can in a recycling bin, officers recovered the can and sent it to the lab for analysis. 3 days later, the call came in from Dr. Wong at the forensic lab. The DNA was a match to the material found under Rebecca Winters' fingernails 24 years earlier. After more than 2 decades of silence, the evidence finally had a voice. And what it said stunned everyone involved in the case, from the newest detective to the oldest resident of Millfield. The killer had never left. He had been there all along, living less than an hour away, potentially crossing paths with Rebecca's family and former students for years. The question now was no longer who had killed Rebecca Winters, but why, and how to prove it beyond the DNA evidence after so many years had passed. As Detective Marsh prepared to make the arrest that would shake Millfield to its core, he couldn't help but wonder what other secrets Robert Holloway might have been keeping all these years. The arrest of Robert Holloway on a rainy Tuesday morning in April 2022 sent shockwaves through Millfield. As news cameras captured the 63-year-old being led in handcuffs from his modest ranch-style home in Newark, longtime residents struggled to reconcile the image of this grey-haired, stooped man with the monster who had haunted their community's collective memory for nearly a quarter-century. "I just can't believe it," said Diane Porter, who had taught mathematics at Millfield High alongside Rebecca. "Bob was so ordinary. He'd fix the radiators in our classrooms, change light bulbs, always with a nod and a quiet, 'Morning, Ma'am.' To think he could do something so terrible." The evidence against Holloway mounted quickly once investigators knew where to look. A search of his home revealed a hidden compartment in his garage workshop containing a small wooden box. Inside was a silver charm bracelet that Karen immediately identified as her sister's, a family heirloom passed down from their grandmother that Rebecca had been wearing the day she disappeared. The bracelet had never been found with her body, and its existence had been withheld from public reports, known only to the family and investigators. "When I saw that bracelet in the evidence bag, I collapsed," Karen later recounted, her voice barely above a whisper. "It was like losing her all over again, but also finding a piece of her coming back to us. I'd given up hope of ever seeing it again." The discovery of this trophy, kept for over 2 decades, transformed the case from a DNA match that might be explained away by clever defense attorneys to a damning piece of evidence that directly tied Holloway to the crime. Further searches uncovered journals dating back to 1997 that, while never explicitly confessing to murder, revealed a disturbing obsession with Rebecca. Entries described watching her grade papers after hours, noting which days she stayed late, and detailing imagined conversations that had never taken place. As investigators dug deeper into Holloway's past, a clearer picture emerged. Before coming to Millfield, he had worked at schools in 3 other districts, each time leaving abruptly after complaints from female teachers about uncomfortable encounters or maintenance visits to their classrooms when they weren't expected. None had risen to the level of criminal charges, but the pattern was unmistakable in retrospect. He was what we now call a hunter, explained forensic psychologist Dr. Amelia Graves, who consulted on the case. He moved from place to place, refining his approach, becoming more careful about hiding his fixations. The fact that he stayed in the area after the murder rather than fleeing suggests a confidence that he wouldn't be caught, and perhaps a desire to remain close to the community where the event that defined his life took place. The prosecution built its case methodically. Beyond the DNA evidence and the trophy, they had the work boots found in Holloway's garage that matched the partial print from the crime scene, fibers from his vehicle that matched those found on Rebecca's clothing, and testimony from former co-workers about his peculiar interest in Rebecca's schedule. Most damning was security camera footage, retrieved from archives of a now-closed gas station, showing Holloway's distinctive blue pickup truck driving toward Riverside Park at 4:37 a.m. on the morning Rebecca's body was discovered. Faced with the overwhelming evidence against him, Holloway's public defender pushed for a plea deal. But County Prosecutor Vanessa Washington, herself a former student of Rebecca's, refused to offer anything less than life without parole. "This crime tore the heart out of our community," Washington stated during a pre-trial press conference. "It stole a beloved teacher from her students, a daughter and sister from her family, and a sense of security from an entire town. The people of Millfield have waited 24 years for answers. They deserve to hear the truth in open court." The trial began in February 2023, with snow falling outside the Athens County Courthouse. The prosecution's case, presented over 8 days, was methodical and devastating, but it was Karen's testimony that brought the courtroom to tears. Her description of the last conversation she'd had with her sister, plans for a surprise party for their mother's birthday, dreams that would never be realized. Rebecca was planning to adopt a child as a single mother, Karen revealed. She'd started the paperwork just a month before she was killed. There would have been another life touched by her love, another person in this world who would have known her kindness. That future was stolen too. Throughout the proceedings, Holloway sat impassively, his eyes fixed on the table before him, never once looking at the crime scene photos or the faces of Rebecca's family. His defense offered little beyond suggestions of contaminated evidence and questions about the reliability of DNA analysis after so many years, arguments that the jury clearly found unconvincing. After just 6 hours of deliberation, the verdict came back: guilty of first-degree murder. At the sentencing hearing 2 weeks later, Holloway finally spoke. His statement, delivered in a monotone voice that echoed through the hushed courtroom, offered no real explanation or remorse. "I never meant for anyone to get hurt," he said. "She shouldn't have fought back. It wasn't supposed to happen that way." Judge Eleanor Riggs sentenced him to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole, adding, "Mr. Holloway, you've already had 24 years of freedom that Rebecca Winters was denied. There will be no more." As Holloway was led away, Karen stood in the gallery, surrounded by former students, now adults, who had come to witness justice for the teacher who had shaped their lives. Among them was Detective Liam Marsh, who removed his badge and placed it briefly over his heart as the door closed behind the convicted killer. The case that had haunted Millfield for so long was officially closed, but its impact continued to resonate. In the months following the trial, Karen worked with state legislators to create Rebecca's Law, which allocated additional funding for cold case investigations and expanded DNA collection requirements. The high school dedicated its library in Rebecca's name, with a small display case holding her favorite books and a plaque commemorating her legacy as an educator. Perhaps most significantly, Rebecca's case led to the formation of the Ohio Cold Case Task Force, a specialized unit dedicated to reviewing unsolved homicides across the state. Within its first year of operation, the task force helped solve 2 additional decades-old murders, bringing closure to families who, like Karen, had nearly abandoned hope. On the 25th anniversary of Rebecca's death, the first since Holloway's conviction, the community gathered not for a vigil of remembrance and unanswered questions, but for a celebration of closure and justice. Karen, now in her 60s, stood once more on the steps of the town hall, this time with Detective Marsh beside her. "My sister loved stories where good triumphed in the end," she told the assembled crowd. She would read them to her students and say that even when justice seems slow, it finds its way eventually. "I didn't believe that for many years, but now I know she was right." As dusk fell over Millfield that evening, residents noticed something unusual: porch lights switching on one by one across the town, not from fear as they had for so many years, but as a symbol of remembrance. The darkness that had settled over Millfield with Rebecca's murder had finally been lifted, not erased from memory, but transformed into something that united rather than divided the community. In the evidence room of the Millfield Police Department, the box containing Rebecca's case files was finally moved to the closed section, the word stamped in red across the label. But in a very real sense, the case would never truly be closed. Its lessons about persistence, advancing technology, and the long arm of justice had become part of Millfield's identity, a reminder that some truths, no matter how deeply buried, eventually find their way into the light.